So, I'm really pleased today to be joined by a colleague of mine, so Boaz Safier on the screen, and Boaz is a partner at Catalyst 1-4, and also is one of our faculty members as well as being one of our executive coaches. Um, Boaz, I'm just going to start with you, just in terms of, as an introduction, what you'd like to share with the group.
Thanks, Damien. I think just, in terms of being an executive coach, we work with people who are in change. I think we're in change all the time as human beings. We're developing, we're becoming. And this concept that we're going to be talking about, I think, is relevant, is interesting, and I hope that whoever's on our call enjoys the conversation. It's a subject, that I'm interested in, so I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Thanks, Boaz. Thank you. So, as Boaz is alluding to, we're here, and as you're aware, dialing into session to talk about the change paradox and the change paradox, how it applies in executive coaching as well. So, I'm going to invite you to just pause for a moment and think about what you personally want to get from today's session. Might be your understanding around the theory, might be something about your practice, maybe an application to you. But it would be helpful just to see where the interest is in terms of, I'm going to ask you to post on the chat what you would like to take from today's conversation around the change paradox. So I'm just going to pause for a moment and let you think about that. And then it'd be great if you just post that in the chat panel, just so we can see where the interest is. What would you like to get from today's session? Just click on chat, click on everyone, and then post it in there. Yeah, thanks, Josie. Great, thank you. So, Boaz, I think let's just start with, I suppose, a key question in terms of this topic. So, yeah, just tell us more. What is the change paradox?
Yeah, thanks, Damien. So the paradoxical theory of change says that change occurs when we allow ourselves to become who we are and not when we try to become who we're not. And if we pause on that for a moment and just think about how we've often been educated and what we are often told through life, is that if we want to change, we need to identify how we want to be, where we want to be, and then we need to push really hard towards it, work hard, push hard, make it happen. And actually, this is a paradox because it says, actually, if we do that, and if we push really, really hard, there's almost going to be a force that is pushing against us and sticking us where we are. And truly to change, what we need to do is almost take off the pressure and allow ourselves to become who we actually are and develop and flourish naturally from there.
Yeah, so I imagine I imagine all the coaches listening and reflecting on this are probably thinking about the coaching process, Boaz, and the goal setting and like you're saying, often the clients will be striving towards achieving something.
And there might be a pressure, if they're in an organization, there might be a pressure on them to be more, to be different. If they're taking on a new role, for example, and I'm sure we'll come to that.
Well, and all the competency frameworks about how a leader should be in the organization and
Yeah,
everything else.
absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm sure we'll come back to these points in a moment, but to just I think it'd be helpful to understand a bit more about the origins in terms of.
Yeah, sure. So it's credited to the work of a guy called Arnold Beiser. He was a student of Fritz Perls. So Fritz Perls was the founder of Gestalt psychotherapy. And I think it's important just to recognize that Gestalt psychotherapy, or the Gestalt school of psychology, sits under the umbrella of what's known as the humanistic school of psychology. And one of the tenets there is that, as human beings, we are resourceful. We have what we need to develop, to flourish, and to reach our potential. And I think to that extent, it kind of links into this, because if you think about an acorn has everything it needs to develop into the most beautiful oak tree it can be. And someone standing next to the acorn and shouting at it, grow faster, grow taller, isn't really going to do anything for it. But actually, given the right environment, given the right conditions, sunlight, nutrients, water, etc., it will, it will develop. So similarly, it kind of has its origins in the idea that, we are resourceful, and we just need the right conditions in order to be able to develop and grow.
Mm. Yeah, which for the coaches that have trained with us, and I'm sure for coaches that have trained at other schools, that will be more of a something that's more familiar in terms of us as coaches creating the conditions. We're being a facilitator. We're not pushing. We're not instructing. And so I suppose the key piece then, Boaz, would be that theory. How's it apply in executive coaching from your own practice?
Yeah, thanks, Damien. And I think maybe just before I go there, just to mention, I believe we have a webinar on Gestalt and coaching, which might be a useful resource for those who are interested more in kind of that school of psychology. In terms of how it applies, I think we started to touch on it earlier, in terms of often our coachees come to coaching because they're aware of a change they want to make. And often it can not happen fast enough. And so there's this idea that hopefully with coaching, it will be a way to really push them through. So if I have an example, got a few clients in mind. One I worked with a while ago. He was a partner in a consulting firm, one of the big four, and he used to go into pitches with other partners, often more senior partners, and he was really aware that he was able to, or they were able to answer questions much more succinctly, with more ease. And he just wanted to be like them. He just wanted to be able to do that. And he recognized that was quite important for his development as well. But the coaching very much had a sense of, what do I need to do to get there? How do I change? The real pressure to change. And another client in a tech industry who was a senior manager going for director promotion, the next level up, she wanted to be more leaderly. I need to be better at leadership. And both of those had a real sense of pressure. And so whilst we started to look at, what does more leaderly mean? How might you want to be? What qualities might you want to borrow from some of the leaders that you're inspired by? And with this other guy around being able to answer questions that come up, what is it that's going to be enabling you to do that, et cetera, et cetera? How do you need to be? There was also an invitation to think about, okay, let's just understand where you are, where you've come from, what's important to you, and take a bit of time just to appreciate that, as well as having a bit of an eye as to, okay, what does good look like? So that's where I think it's a paradox, because it's not I'll let go of any goals, but it's also not I'm going to push towards those goals.
Yeah. So I suppose what's going on let me just share a couple of reflections. One, I'm thinking, often we hear that pressure in the coach's language, so the shoulding, This is what I
Yeah,
should be. This is
yeah,
what I should do.
absolutely.
And maybe there's an example that I'll pull in a moment. But I'm also imagining, Boaz, for some coachees, if you're talking about this change paradox with them, for instance, I just wonder how whether they might get quite frustrated or resistant to the
Yeah,
idea of not pushing.
yeah,
That's something
yeah.
they're so used to.
And that's a really good question. You know, I tend to work a lot in professional services. They are quite pacey organizations generally.
Mm-mm.
And actually inviting someone to um, take a bit of a pause to think about actually why is that important for you? What does that mean for you? What is it that is a natural strength that you have? And um, you know, who are you? Can be a bit I guess, unsettling or unexpected in the process. So I sometimes talk about the change paradox and talk about, you know, have you tried this before and where has it led you to? And often people do recognize that resistance and the stuckness. Um, and one of the models that I often then draw on is Dilts's logical levels and the idea that, you know, we can change environment, we can change behavior, we can change skills and capabilities, but really often the work that is needed in coaching or the work that has the real shift, the real power, is then when we work further up that pyramid and we start to think about values and we start to think about purpose and identity. And I guess the invitation really is to have some time to explore that in the coaching session. So I'm not saying don't think about skills and capabilities, but I'm saying it's an and, not an or.
Mm-mm.
And most actually do get that. You know, once we allow ourselves to sink into a coaching program, and yeah, I think most are able to appreciate that.
Mm. Yeah, and I mean what I'm hearing is there's also a deeper exploration around, rather than it being focused on who I should be, actually through this pausing and this connecting with those deeper aspects of my unconscious around my values, my identity, my purpose. There's an understanding of who I am and who I
Yeah.
want to be.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that, especially in professional services, can sometimes feel like a luxury.
Mm,
Um, and of course, I will be guided by the coachee as to what they're interested in and where they want to go. I might kind of use these models to raise awareness. But I think at a fundamental level, we do get this. You know, we do get the power in actually spending a bit of time thinking about some of those pieces at the upper end of the logical levels pyramid.
mm. Yeah, and it makes me think about a client of mine who, yeah, was senior in an organization and had come to coaching because he should be the CEO. Actually, you know, the I suppose the self-actualization, because you said about the humanistic psychology, when that natural impulse to grow for him was all about creativity, actually,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah,
and actually in that moment where he connected to that deeper understanding of himself and that energy came through, you know, there was a completely different direction that actually he
right.
then saw, and as far as I'm aware, he's moving towards that now, you know.
Mm,
So I suppose,
mm,
so I suppose for some people there could be a real challenge in this as well, in terms of
mm.
letting go of the should.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I do a lot of work in partnerships where you know, certainly historically the idea is that you develop through the organization and get to partner, and that's always been the ideal, the place where you should end up, really. If you've done a good job of your development, you should end up as partner. Um, and I'm doing a lot of work with individuals to think about actually what is it you want, and if you do go for partnership, what kind of partner do you want to be? What's important for you? Um, and actually, creativity is an interesting one because someone might decide that actually partnership's not for me. Someone else might decide actually creativity is really important for me, and actually by being a partner,
Mm.
I can be a bit more creative. I could create a business within the larger firm that I really want. And actually, by framing it as it's me being able to expand and unleash my desire for creativity,
Mm.
that actually getting to partnership will allow me to be able to do that. And suddenly they've got the energy, suddenly they've got the motivation. And it's not, you should be, but actually, I really want to be. This is my way of then doing the work that I really want to do.
Mm.
So yeah, an interesting lens on the
Mm.
shoulds versus the wants.
Mm.
And we don't know what we want unless we give ourselves some time to really think about it.
Mm. Yeah, and then there's, I mean, Gestalt, like other modalities, um, has this present moment focus in terms of that awareness. You know, I suppose what I'm hearing and reflecting on in my own practice are those moments where we're inviting a coachee to step into the present moment
Yes,
and fully understand who they're being.
yes,
Um, yeah, there's a different, there can often be a different um, challenge that comes with that, actually.
yes, yes, yes. There's a lovely question, what's it like to be you when all the noise around you quietens. And I think there's a nice exploration, when all the no noise around you quietens, what is it that you really want? What's it that really important for you? And of
Mm.
course, that noise is the organizational pressure. It's the perceived peer pressure in terms of where they are, what they've done. It's pressure from home, family, society, whatever it might be. But actually, if we can let that go for a bit, and if we can connect with ourselves, actually, what is it that's important for us?
Yeah. So in some ways, the coach um, being congruent in that inquiry with the client, because
Yeah.
there may be a lot of unknown, there may be a lot of noise, as you're saying, you know.
Yes, 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 yes. And I think it is, the reason for me it's a paradox is because it's also not saying, do you know what, sit on the sofa 24 hours a day and let yourself develop and let development happen. I think there is something about intentionality, and there is something about us as humans being aware of what's important for us, the conditions that we need, and helping ourselves seek those. And of course, the coach can be great in providing those for us. So there is some work on our part to develop and to fulfill our potential, but it's not always the same as what we might think initially, which is to work harder, work faster, push more, and you'll get there. And Arnold Weiser wrote the the paradoxical theory of change, and if you Google that, you'll find you'll find the article. And Ruth Lampert, who was a writer, also wrote an article called The Case for Going Easy, or The Case for Going Gentle, I believe. And again, along the similar lines, that that there is real power in the gentle rather than the push, push, push.
Mm. Yeah, but I suppose again the challenge can often be um, supporting the client to listen to that deeper impulse in terms
Yeah,
of that sort of, if you think about it again, that self-actualization in terms of who they are and who they can be, you know, rather than
yeah,
this who they should be, that louder,
yeah,
you know.
yeah. yeah, which can be really loud,
Mm.
Um, yes,
So you've mentioned a couple of articles there. I suppose if because we're pushed for time, but just that sense of, if coaches are interested in learning more about this, thinking about how it applies, what would be your recommendations, Boaz?
I'd actually Google the paradoxical theory of change, Arnold Beiser, and there's a nice article that he wrote. Now, he was a therapist, so it's written with a therapeutic lens. Um, but I do think that the concepts that are presented really apply to us as human beings, but also apply to us as coaches in our work to support others who are going through personal growth and through change. So
Mm.
that's a nice resource, as well as our webinar on Gestalt, just to get a bit more of a sense of the Gestalt school of psychology.
Mm. Yeah, and I'm just thinking for us as coaches, yeah, I'm also thinking about there's a lot of shoulds, in our industry, and often there's a lot of
Mm.
comparisons going on in terms of who we should be as coaches. I suppose just from your seat, Boaz, and the work that you've done on yourself and understanding of this change theory, what would you offer the coaches that are listening to this discussion just around this? Because I know there's a number that are training at the moment, getting accreditation, etc., etc.
Yeah, I think it's to the concept of that paradox. Um, it can be really helpful to scan around and see what you appreciate in other coaches, and there are qualities that you might want to borrow and make your own. Um, and there's also something for stopping to think about actually what kind of coach do you want to be? What informs you as a coach? Where have you come from? What's shaped who you are? And therefore, how do you want to practice? And I think in leadership, there are many different types of leader. Um, and and as a leader, we need to make some decisions as to what's authentic to us, and what's the leader that we want to be. What do we want to role model? What's important for us? I think it's very similar as a coach as well. Yeah, yeah. What is it that guides us, and what is it we care about?
Mm. Yeah, thanks, Boaz. I mean, it's a word we haven't been using a lot, but that whole piece of acceptance is sort of an undercurrent here in terms of this, fully accepting who I am, so I can change.
Yeah, yeah, and I think Lampert's work around the case for going gentle. There is something about kindness and acceptance in terms of who we are, and actually, when we truly accept who we are and where we are, actually, and interestingly, I see this more and more in coaching. Suddenly, something starts to unlock. So for a long time, people have been pushing, 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 and then there's that resistance, and then almost you allow yourself just to think about some things slightly differently, some things that are important, and then um, the movement happens.
Mm. Thank you. So we're sort of in the final stretch, Boaz, in terms of
Yeah,
the time that we have available. So anything else you would just like to offer or reflect to the group about this topic?
um, I, I think this is one for reflection. Reflection. How much do you recognize this in your own life? Where is it applied? Where have you enabled yourself to stop and just think about what's important for you? Um, I think reflecting on this paradox really is where the power is, because you start to see things slightly differently. And I guess that's the invitation, and that's the whole point of doing these webinars. It's to throw out a concept, not to say this is the truth and this is what you need to follow and this is how you need to be, because again, that goes to the should, but to throw something to say, hey, this is a way of looking at change, in and amongst the myriad of other models, and how does it apply to you? What sense do you make of it?
Mhm. Thank you. Thanks, Boaz.